My wife said she needed a girls' weekend. Then my credit card sent me a hotel alert. I never used to be the kind of person who checked bank notifications closely. They'd pop up on my phone. I'd glance at the amount to make sure nothing looked insane, and I'd move on with my day. That habit ended on a Friday night in March at 11:42 p.m. when a single push notification changed the entire trajectory of my marriage. My name's Chris. I'm 34. My wife's name is Sarah, and at the time this happened, we'd been married for 6 years, together for 9. And I want to say up front because I know how these stories usually go, and I know what people assume the second they hear credit card alert and hotel in the same sentence, that I genuinely, right up until that moment, was not a suspicious husband. I trusted her completely. That's actually part of what made everything that followed so disorienting. Sarah works in pharmaceutical sales, a job that keeps her on the road more than either of us would like, but it pays well and she's good at it. Because of the travel, she doesn't get a ton of time with her close friend group, a tight cluster of 5 women she's known since college, who call themselves, only half-jokingly, the Council. They do a big trip once a year, usually somewhere warm, and treat it as sacred, non-negotiable time. That March, Sarah told me the Council was doing a weekend trip to Charleston, 3 nights, Thursday to Sunday, to celebrate one of the friends, Jenna, finally finishing her doctorate. Sarah was excited about it in a way that felt completely normal to me. She'd been stressed with work. We'd had a rough few months with some family stuff on my side. My dad's health had taken a downturn, which had eaten a lot of my emotional bandwidth, and if I'm honest, probably made me less present as a husband than I should have been. And a weekend with old friends seemed like exactly what she needed. I drove her to the airport on Thursday morning. She texted me photos of the group at brunch that afternoon, 5 women, mimosas, big smiles, the kind of picture that looks exactly like what it's supposed to look like. I didn't think about any of it again until Friday night. I was on the couch, half watching a show, half scrolling my phone, when the alert came through from our joint credit card app. I actually almost swiped it away without reading it, the way you do with most notifications. Something made me pause. I think it was just the word hotel, paired with a city I didn't recognize. Charge, $412, Cypress Ridge in Asheville, NC *, Asheville, not Charleston. My first instinct genuinely was that it was a mistake. Maybe the flight got rerouted. Maybe there was a change of plans I hadn't heard about. Maybe autocorrect on some travel app had mangled a city name into the wrong database entry. I am by nature someone who looks for the most boring explanation first. I've never been a jealous person, and I actually remember feeling a little embarrassed even opening the transaction detail, like I was doing something slightly paranoid. But the charge was clear. Cypress Ridge Inn, Asheville, North Carolina. 1 room, booked for 2 nights, Thursday and Friday, under the account associated with Sarah's card. Texted her, hey, random question, but did you guys end up going to Asheville instead of Charleston? Card just pinged with an Asheville hotel. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. It took almost 4 full minutes for her to respond, which doesn't sound like much until you're staring at a screen waiting for it. Oh yeah, Charleston flights got weirdly expensive, so we pivoted last minute, lol. Should have told you, my bad. It was a plausible answer. Genuinely plausible, flight prices do that, plans do shift. And under any other circumstances, I probably would have just said, haha, no worries, and gone back to my show. But something about the timing of the response, the slight over-explanation of it, the lull doing a lot of work at the end of a text that was otherwise pretty flat, it snagged on something in me. Can't fully explain the instinct except to say that after 9 years with someone, you develop a kind of pattern recognition for their voice, even in text. And that text didn't quite sound like her. I told myself I was being paranoid. I put the phone down. I did not sleep well. The next morning, Saturday, I did something I'm not proud of, but also don't regret. I texted Jenna. Not Sarah, Jenna, the friend whose doctorate they were supposedly celebrating. Always gotten along well. She'd been at our wedding. She was the kind of friend of my wife who'd also become a bit of a friend of mine over the years. And I figured if anyone would give me a straight, uncomplicated answer, it'd be her. I kept it casual. Hey, hope Asheville's treating you all well. Tell Sarah I said hi, lol. Jenna's response came about 20 minutes later, and it was the kind of response that makes your stomach drop through the floor before your brain even finishes processing the words. What? We're not in Asheville. We're in Charleston. We miss Sarah so much this year. Is she doing okay? She said she couldn't make it because of a work thing. I read that text probably 11 times. She said she couldn't make it because of a work thing. There was no girls' weekend from Sarah's perspective. Or rather, there was a girls' weekend and Sarah wasn't at it. The council was in Charleston, exactly as planned, exactly as she'd originally told me. Sarah simply wasn't there. I sat at our kitchen table for a long time after that, phone in my hand, feeling something between nausea and an eerie, unnatural calm. The calm that comes right before you fall apart, I think, when your body hasn't caught up yet to what your mind already knows. I didn't respond to Sarah's earlier text. I didn't text her at all, actually. I wanted to see what she'd say, unprompted, if I gave her room. Saturday was excruciating. Sarah texted twice more that day, one photo of what she said was a rooftop bar in Charleston, which notably had 0 identifying features, just a generic city skyline that could have been almost anywhere, and one message asking how my dad was doing, which under normal circumstances would have felt sweet and thoughtful, and instead felt in that moment almost cruel in its normalcy. I called my brother that night. Not to strategize, just because I needed to say the words out loud to someone, to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. He was quiet for a while after I explained everything, then said something that stuck with me. Don't confront her over text. Whatever this is, you deserve to see her face when you ask. So I waited. Told myself I'd wait until she got home Sunday night and ask her in person calmly, without accusation, just a direct question, and I'd watch what happened to her face when I asked it. That was without question the longest 36 hours of my life. Sarah got home Sunday around 7 p.m., rolling her suitcase in with the particular tired but happy energy of someone back from a trip with friends, or at least, doing an extremely convincing impression of that energy. She kissed me hello, started telling me about Charleston, a restaurant they'd supposedly gone to, a mix-up with their Airbnb, and I let her talk for maybe 90 seconds before I said it. I talked to Jenna yesterday. She stopped mid-sentence. I watched her face do something I'd never seen it do before, a kind of controlled collapse, like watching someone try very hard to keep standing after their legs have already given out. What do you mean you talked to Jenna? Texted her Saturday morning. She said the group's in Charleston. She said you told them you couldn't make it because of a work thing. I kept my voice level, which took every ounce of composure I had. So I need you to tell me where you actually were. There was a long silence. I watched her consider, very visibly, whether to keep lying, and I think some part of her recognized that the lie had already collapsed and there was no version of continuing it that would hold. It was in Asheville, she said finally, quietly. With who? Another long pause. It's not what you think. Sarah, with who? She sat down at the kitchen table across from me and told me. His name, I'll call him the guy from work, because honestly he doesn't deserve more real estate in this story than that, was a regional manager she worked with occasionally, someone she'd been messaging with, in her words, as friends, for about 4 months. They'd never physically been together before this, she insisted. This Asheville trip was supposed to be, again, her words, just to see if there was actually something there, without it being a big dramatic thing. I asked if they slept together. She said yes. I want to be honest about something here. I didn't yell. I've thought a lot since about why I didn't. I think some combination of shock and the fact that some part of me had already grieved the relationship in the 36 hours between the notification and that conversation, so that by the time I got the confirmation, I was almost past the anger and already somewhere colder and sadder. How long has this been going on? I asked. The messaging, 4 months. This was the first time anything actually happened. Do you believe that? I asked her, which I know is a strange question to ask someone, but I meant it. I wanted to know if she herself believed the version of events she was telling me, or if she knew, somewhere underneath it, that it was more than that. She started crying at that point and said she didn't know anymore. Things with us had felt distant for a while, which, to be fair, wasn't entirely untrue, given everything with my dad and how withdrawn I'd probably been, and that the attention from this other guy had felt easy in a way our marriage hadn't lately. I remember thinking, with a strange, detached clarity, that easy is exactly the word people use to describe things that require no honesty. I moved into our guest room that night. We didn't sleep in the same bed again after that conversation. I took the following Monday off work, which I never do, and spent most of it just sitting with the information, trying to figure out what I actually felt underneath the shock. What surprised me most in the days that followed wasn't the affair itself, painful as that was. It was the elaborate machinery of the lie. Sarah hadn't just seized an opportunity in a moment of weakness. She'd built an entire fake weekend. She coordinated with Jenna and the group loosely enough that it wouldn't fall apart under casual questioning. She told them she had a work thing, a lie small enough not to invite follow-up questions. She'd sent me photos that were vague enough to not be traceable. She'd planned, in other words, to get away with it completely, and the only reason I ever found out was a $412 automated bank notification that she apparently hadn't thought to account for. That detail bothered me more than almost anything else. Not that she'd lied, people who have affairs lie. That's sort of the baseline mechanic of the thing, but that the lie had clearly been built with real premeditation, over what sounded like weeks of planning, and the only thing that undid it was an accident of financial infrastructure. If that card had been in her name only, or if I'd had notifications turned off, or if I'd been slightly less attentive that Friday night, I might genuinely never have known. I asked her, a few days later, when we finally had a longer conversation, whether she would have told me if I hadn't found out. She was quiet for a long moment before admitting, honestly, that she didn't know. She'd told herself it would be a one-time thing that she could carry alone and move past without it ever touching our marriage. I understood intellectually why someone might tell themselves that story. I did not find it comforting. We're currently separated, not divorced, not yet, and I genuinely don't know if we will end up there or not, but living apart, with a level of distance between us that I don't think either of us fully anticipated 3 months ago. Sarah has asked more than once for a chance to work on things, has gone to individual therapy, has been, by every observable measure, doing the things a person does when they're trying to prove something has genuinely changed. I go back and forth on how I feel about all of it, honestly more than I expected to. Some days I think there's a version of us that survives this, flawed, scarred, but real. Other days I think about the specificity of the lie, the 4 months of messaging that preceded it, the calm way she answered my first text. Charleston flights got weirdly expensive, so we pivoted last minute lol, and I don't know how you build trust back on top of a foundation like that. What I keep coming back to more than the affair itself is how ordinary the discovery was. No dramatic confrontation, no private investigator, no torn ticket stub found in a coat pocket. Just a Friday night on the couch, a half-watched show, and a bank app that pinged at 11, 4:42 p.m. because a hotel in Asheville processed a $412 charge under a name that was supposed to be 400 miles away in Charleston. I think about that sometimes, how the entire shape of my life, the next several months, the questions I now carry about everything from her business trips to her late nights at the office, all trace back to one small, mundane piece of automated financial software doing exactly what it was designed to do. Nothing dramatic, just a number and a city that didn't match the story I'd been told. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it just shows up as a push notification, and you're the only one who happens to be looking at your phone. The weeks after the confrontation, I did something I'm not entirely proud of, but that felt necessary at the time. I went back through months of old messages, old calendar entries, old credit card statements, trying to understand how long this had actually been building, and how much of what I remembered as normal had actually been the machinery of an affair running quietly underneath our lives. It wasn't hard to find, once I knew what I was looking for. Team dinner in January that ran until 1 a.m., a conference in February that I now realized had suspiciously flexible dates. A new habit, starting around March, of her taking calls in the car in the driveway instead of inside the house, which she'd explained at the time as not wanting to disturb me while I was working from home. I believed her, obviously, because I had no reason not to. That's the part that still gets me, not that the lies were sophisticated, but that they didn't need to be, because trust does most of the work of covering for a lie all on its own. I found the credit card statement from the Asheville trip itself, too, once I actually sat down and went through it line by line instead of just the single alert that had started everything. There was a second charge from a wine bar, dated the same night as the hotel booking, for $86. Charge from a gas station about halfway between our city and Asheville, the kind of stop you'd make on a 4-hour drive. Small, mundane receipts that, stacked together, told a story with far more detail than I think Sarah ever expected me to assemble. I didn't confront her again with any of this, honestly. At the time I'd pieced it together, the larger truth was already out, and going through the receipts felt less like gathering ammunition and more like a strange, private ritual of grief, trying to understand the shape of the thing that had ended my marriage, even if the marriage technically hadn't ended yet. Word got out slowly, the way these things do. I told my brother first, obviously, since he'd been the one talking me through it in real time. I told my mom about 3 weeks in, mostly because she noticed I wasn't myself and pressed until I explained. I did not tell Sarah's family, at least not directly. That felt like a line I didn't want to be the one to cross, even though some part of me in my angrier moments wanted to. The hardest conversation by far was with our friend group, most of whom were mutual friends Sarah and I had built together over 9 years. There's a specific kind of grief in realizing that a breakup, or a potential one, doesn't just cost you a spouse, it costs you a social structure. Dinner parties, group chats, the couple everyone invites together to things. I watched over the following months as some friends tried to stay neutral, some quietly sided with Sarah, and a smaller number made it clear, without me even having to ask, that they were in my corner regardless of what happened next. Jenna notably felt terrible, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she felt like an unwitting accomplice, having unknowingly confirmed Sarah's absence from the actual Charleston trip without any idea what she was walking into. She apologized to me more than once for something that was never her fault, and I told her honestly that she'd done exactly the right thing by answering my text honestly. If anything, she'd given me the one piece of unfiltered truth in an otherwise carefully constructed lie. Sarah asked, about a month into our separation, if I'd consider couples counseling. I said I'd think about it, and eventually agreed to a handful of sessions, mostly because I didn't want to make a permanent decision about the marriage from inside the rawest part of the anger. Sessions have been useful in the sense that they've given both of us language for things we hadn't said out loud. She's talked, at length, about feeling emotionally sidelined during the stretch when my dad's health was declining, about the specific loneliness of being married to someone who's present in the house but absent everywhere else. I don't dispute that I was distant during that period. I've told her repeatedly that I understand how someone can end up lonely inside a marriage that looks fine from the outside. What I haven't been able to get past, no matter how many sessions we do, is the engineering of the lie. Loneliness explains an affair happening. It doesn't explain 4 months of secret messaging, a fabricated trip built around real friends who had no idea they were being used as cover, and a calm, immediate, plausible-sounding text. Charleston flights got weirdly expensive, so we pivoted last-minute lol that came together in under 4 minutes, with a lol tacked on the end like a period at the close of a sentence she'd clearly already rehearsed in her head before I'd even asked the question. We're still separated as I write this. Sarah has moved into a short-term rental about 15 minutes from our place. We talk most days, mostly about logistics, the house, some shared bills, occasionally something more personal that neither of us seems fully able to avoid. I don't know if we'll reconcile. Some days I think the version of us that survives this could be stronger, more honest, built on something realer than the comfortable autopilot we drifted into before. Other days I think about the Asheville hotel receipt, and the gas station halfway there, and the lull, and I don't know how you rebuild a floor on top of a foundation that was hiding an entire structure underneath it. What I keep coming back to in the quiet moments is how close I came to never knowing at all if the card had been solely in her name. If I'd silenced notifications that week, the way I almost did, annoyed by how many pointless alerts my banking app usually sends. She'd simply paid in cash for the hotel, instead of using a card linked to a joint account out of what I now understand was pure habit rather than carelessness. An entire alternate version of my life exists somewhere, one where I never find out, one where I keep believing in a girl's weekend that never happened, indefinitely, maybe forever. I don't know if that version would have been better or worse. I just know it's not the one I got. When I got started with a notification at 11:42 p.m. on a Friday night, 4 words and a dollar amount that didn't match a story I had no reason, until that moment, to doubt.